Today, my guest is Andre Harel, 30 years of experience in corporate commercial leadership. His footprint has a planted presence in both domestic and international markets. Key executive leadership roles have included venture capital and private equity, commercial infrastructure management, centers of process excellence, mergers and acquisitions, and global business development. Andre is a certified business mentor and a well-known keynote speaker, and he's a C-suite advisor in the international Fortune 500 space. Clients include Johnson& Johnson, HP, BASF, Revlon, Twitter, and SC Johnson. Finally, Andre sits on McKinsey's executive panel for healthcare, consumer, and chemicals. Andre, welcome, and thank you for speaking with us today.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
It's a crazy time in the markets, Andre, and it really is too early to tell which way the world will unfold. But what have you been hearing in the markets at the moment?
Yeah, it's pretty much what you just said. It's a lot of uncertainty, and I think we're moving into the space of what I've called a market of ambiguity, because of which no one really knows what's going to happen on the other side of everything that's going on with this pandemic. But one of the things is for sure is that I think whatever directions companies take moving forward, CEOs take moving forward, or even capital houses or investment houses move forward, is that their plan is going to have to be relatively flexible in terms of its malleability, with respects to how they drive certain things within the cash flow, or their people management, or even their vision. That's going to have to be very malleable and flexible in terms of where the wind is going to be headed. But I think it's where everybody's at right now in terms of no one really knows what direction to take specifically as far as going forward. But knowing that your ability to be able to be flexible and kind of have contingency plans in place is going to be very important, which with regards to whatever decision you're going to make.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting as well. I mean, I've been speaking to, over the last couple of weeks, a number of different funds in different parts of the world, in Asia, Middle East, Europe, and North America. And every single conversation is a different story. So I think it very much depends on where those clients particularly are and where their focus is and what industry they're focused on. Some industries are doing quite well, and other industries are not doing so well. So I think it does come down to the industry sector as well that those particular clients are in as well.
Yeah, that's so perfect, because I think with regards to that, there are some companies, and as you mentioned, Ken, within the space that they're in, they're still in the crisis mode, which is they're still coming out of whether they're coming out of it or whether they're still in the whole shock and awe of this is totally happening. Oh boy, I've got to let a lot of people go. Oh boy, I really didn't have a strong balance sheet coming into this.
Mm.
Now what the heck am I going to do? So it's that whole idea of shock, depending on, as you mentioned, what space they're in. And then you have the other point of, well, we're out of the shock phase. Now we're in the assessment phase. How much, quote unquote, damages has this virus done to our business? Or what are the challenges that we need to face, or that we need to, I guess, tackle head on, that this virus and this pandemic has pretty much pressed upon us. And so it's wherever the company is at, or
Yes.
wherever, and I go back to the leadership. It's wherever the leadership is at in terms of how they're reacting, to everything that's taking place, whether they are still in the shock and awe, or whether they're in the, well, we're past the shock and awe. Now we have to look at the assessment of quote unquote damages and the challenges that are confronting us. How do we attack that? What types of plans do we put in place? How do we deal with this new normal with our employees at home, Ken? They're at
Yes, yes,
home.
of
They're
course.
at home. So
That's right.
how do we deal with that? So you're absolutely right. It varies from city to city, especially in the United States, and now globally from country to country, and how we're able to kind of deal with all this. But one thing is for sure, we are all in this almost at the same time in terms of trying to figure out what's going to happen on the back end. So I think that's a consistent kind of theme across the entire world right now.
Mhm. Well, for those companies that are experiencing, I suppose, difficulty though, I mean, there's, as we just mentioned, there's two types of organizations out there. The ones that are, have it in hand, and they're replanning and looking at market reentry. But those organizations that are down, I mean, what can those leaders do? What can those boards do to, mitigate those risks, tackle those immediate priorities and ensure business continuity and actually get through the crisis?
Yeah, one of the things that I've talked about, and I've had this conversation with, companies that I've worked with, even just as early as last week, is this ability to over communicate. You can look at more of the tactical strategies, such as looking at your cash flow, looking at your balance sheets, looking at, your deposits coming in, your deposits going out. I would think any business on this earth does not have plans in place when they don't have income coming in. It's kind of hard to keep a business going forward when you don't have income coming in, let alone keeping employees on the payroll. So this whole idea of, over communicating in terms of, what is the vision going to look like, I guess, moving forward. And there's four areas that I've kind of spoken with companies about and kind of work with companies about. And the four areas are: first, assessment, which I just talked about earlier, looking at what are the challenges that this pandemic has caused to our business. And then this whole idea, and the second part of this whole idea of recovery. How do we now look at our cash flow? How much money do we have on our balance sheets right now that can keep us afloat once we do get the green light that we can start opening up our businesses? What's our cost going to look like? One of the things that is very clear is that business is not going to look the same. So if you have a brick and mortar building, what is that going to look like in terms of making sure that it's sterilized, making sure that there's distance between? I mean, there are additional costs that you didn't have prior to going into this pandemic that you're going to have moving forward. So this whole idea of recovery from a cash flow standpoint, and then aspiration. What's our new vision now? I would venture to say each of the businesses now that are in play have totally different visions now than they did last January. I mean, everything, the direction, the aspiration, the planning, the forecasting, all looks different. And so what does that look like? And then I talked about earlier this whole idea of flexibility and elasticity. How are we able to be malleable and nimble based on what direction we're going to move into at the other end of this?
Exactly. And you mentioned as well just a few moments ago that of course all of these staff, they're working remotely now and
Mm-hmm.
remotely from home. And this is new, not to everyone, but to a lot of our listeners out there. They haven't maybe been in that position before. So, how can those leaders continue to manage effectively and
Yeah.
remotely for a prolonged period of time? Because we don't know how long this is going to last.
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I think that's the big challenge. As I mentioned, there's a lot of businessy type, subjects that companies need to stay on top of. But the one important, I guess, if you want to say skill or attribute or strategy, that one, when I say one, I'm talking about the leader of an organization needs to be on top of is communication. And there's always this. Question about over communicating. But I'm going to reiterate, and I've had this conversation with many CEOs, is that you can't over communicate enough. There's no such thing as over communication during this time. Because one of the things, and I mentioned this word earlier, one of the things you don't want to have during this time is ambiguity.
Mm.
And I understand, some companies raise can ambiguity as a mantra. If you can get through ambiguity in our company, you'll be successful. Well, in this situation, ambiguity is not positive. It's not a good thing
Agreed. Agreed.
because when you've got people at home
Mm.
and not at the building or not at the office where you can kind of get everybody in one room and kind of go over the direction, that's a challenge. And so this whole idea of ensuring that everyone's on the same page, in terms of what is the direction going to be moving forward, the over communication of that direction, the over communication can of everyone's roles and responsibilities as we get through this, the over communication of what the vision is going to look like on the back end, the over communication of what the goals are going to look like on the back end. That can't be reiterated enough. If companies are saying, hey, look, we're going to have Zoom meetings every Wednesday, then that's fine. If if that is your thoughts of what over communication should be. I'm not going to argue tactically and specifically how many times a CEO or a company should meet with their people per week during a Zoom call or WebEx call. I'm not going to give that number out, but I'm going to say, hey, look, if you're comfortable with ensuring that everyone is on the same page, because everyone's at home and everyone has
Yep.
distractions at home with taking care of the kids, the dog is barking. Everybody has to understand what the goal and what the aspiration is moving forward. It's going to look like on the back end of this is going to be appropriate moving forward. So my whole, I guess, suggestion and recommendation to every company on this planet is over communicate, over communicate, and over communicate.
Fantastic, fantastic. And what else should they be telling their staff? I mean, you've come up with some great advice in terms of
Mm.
how they should be communicating. But anything else in particular you think would be worth bearing in mind and communicating with the staff whilst they're at home?
Yeah, I can't think of anything more important than ensuring that every person on the team understands their role and responsibilities. One of the things that happens when you go into an office every day is that everyone kind of goes to their office, whether it's the open office where everybody's in a cubicle, or whether it's the office where everybody closes the door. Innately, when people walk through that front door, they understand what their role and responsibility is, whether they're in operations, whether they're in research and development, whether they're in IT, whether they're in marketing or sales. Everyone, has an innate, thought process of what their role is going to look like from the time they walk in the office. That's a little bit different now, in that, when you're at home and when you're going through all this quote unquote ambiguity right now, where no one knows what's going to really knows what's going to happen on the other end of this, roles and responsibilities have to be kind of spoken through and kind of agreed upon and kind of aligned on each of the quote unquote meetings that you have during the week, so that if Ken understands that his role with marketing is this and being more specific, then that's appropriate. If Andre knows that his roles and responsibilities, operations or sales, well, what does that look like tactically and specifically? So I would say, while everyone is away from each other because we're all practicing social distancing and that everybody's at home, I would venture to say everyone must know, Ken, their specific roles and responsibilities while they're at home, and while everyone's waiting to get back into the office or waiting to get back into their jobs. That's going to be so important, because once we actually come out of this, and once it's the green light so that everybody has the opportunity to go to the office, you don't want people to kind of go in the office and say, okay, I've been at home for the last 2 or 3 months, and now I'm in the office. What's next?
Yeah,
What do I do now?
of course. Yeah,
That can't be there.
yep. That
Yeah,
can't happen. That
that
can't
can't
happen.
happen.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. But I mean, we are going to get through this, and we are going to come out the other side. And in some countries now, you're beginning to see them opening up. Denmark, for example. I mean, it's the 20th of the 4th today, and Denmark schools, they sort of going back. So
Mm-hmm.
Europe is beginning to
Mm-hmm.
open up again. And some of the conversations that I've been having in Europe with the fund managers and private equity firms is very much around re-entry planning and
Mm-hmm.
resuming business. And I'm seeing it in the senior recruitment industry. I mean, we're still getting roles coming through very much at the C-suite and key financial roles. So firms in Europe are now very much looking at market re-entry and getting back to, well, we can't really say business as usual, but getting back to business. But for those listeners who are in the US, I mean, what resources should they have in place to, help with that market re-entry planning and resuming business?
When has the last time, and this is not a question posed to you, Ken, it's almost a rhetorical question, but when's the last time you've heard of and I say clash in the most positive way, not necessarily in the negative way, but when is the last time you've heard of a clash of an economical platform or base and a healthcare economical
Yes, true.
base or
Very
platform?
true. Yeah.
I mean, the economics and the economy and healthcare clashing together. I mean, I'm geez, I'm well into my years of age, and this is the first I've ever seen both the economy and healthcare kind of clash together into this, some would say very unsettling taste of a sandwich. I mean, now you've got CEOs, and now you've got VC houses and PE houses and even hedge funds going into the new world, not necessarily thinking so much of the financial ramifications, but now they're thinking of the financial and healthcare ramifications. So now to answer your question, are there going to be enough tests in place where when businesses start up, are they going to have the PPEs or the availability of resources to test people coming into the office? If I'm an investor, I'm now saying to myself, okay, if I'm going to invest in this business that yeah has a pretty decent balance sheet, and they seem to have enough capable employees in place to kind of get us through this. Now I'm thinking, geez, are everybody going to be healthy?
Right?
going,
Yeah.
going into the office now. Before I was thinking about the numbers, and I was thinking
Mm.
about the valuations, and I was thinking
Mhm.
about the returns, and I was thinking about the exit strategies and all this other kind of stuff. Now I got to think about, before we even get there, do we have a situation where these companies are going to be healthy? And I mean healthy from a physical standpoint, from a health standpoint. Our employees going to feel comfortable going back to work. Let's not lose sight of that. The employees
Totally.
that now that I'm investing in, are they going to feel comfortable going back to work? Ken, even if it's 6 feet apart, are they going to feel comfortable that Bill or Tom or Larry down the way here is not sick? So now I got
Hmm.
to think about, do we have enough safety from a health standpoint, resources in place, so that people are comfortable going to work. So going back to that question, I've got to now, as a financial expert and as someone that's a keen investor, am I investing in a business that's going to have quote unquote healthcare resources in place so that people feel as though they're not going to get sick and they remain productive, because I want to get a return on my investment on the back end. So now we're moving into this kind of world that healthcare is now going to start becoming more of a pronounced priority. And again, financing and things like that, and how we evaluate assets are still going to be important, but there's going to be new dynamics coming into place moving forward. So that's the interesting change that's going to take place.
Yes. Of course, we talk about getting back to business, and governments are giving us guidelines in terms of how many weeks it's going to be, but that's all taking into account no secondary outbreak. I mean, we're
Right,
seeing that
right,
and that's
right,
one of the things that
right.
you've just touched on now. It's all well and good to get back to the office and everything else, but will the staff be comfortable doing that? I mean, is that something that businesses can actually do? Will they, if there is a secondary outbreak? I mean, what will that do to the markets and businesses as a whole? That's something else that we have to take into consideration, and a very very valid point. Actually,
What,
we
what
we're all thinking about the financials, but not
absolutely.
the health considerations as well. Getting back to the
What
office.
And it's interesting too, because it's I think everyone's kind of coming to this. Oh boy, I think everyone's coming to this, and I say this in the most positive way, but we're all coming to this conclusion that we're not going to have a vaccine for, I mean, a true vaccine where it's been tested, it's gone through the rigor, it's gone through the validation, it's gone through every
Time.
type of testing imaginable for like what, another 12 to 18 months. I mean, specifically, we've got a lot of companies out there that are in clinical trials, that are going through the process. But in terms of the validation of testing, of having something that's going to be available from a strong vaccine, that's not going to happen for a little while. So what do we do now? You can't shut down the whole world for the next 2 years. That's not going to happen. That just can happen. So the next thing everyone's thinking about is testing. And
Yes.
I'm working with a company right now that we're coming out with our own home testing
Mhm.
product that's going to be utilized for home testing for COVID. But then we're going through FDA approval with that right now, so that's going to have to go through its rigor. So there will be ample amount of, hopefully, we're crossing our fingers here, testing that's going to be available. But to your point and to your question, Ken, we're not going to have something that is going to quote unquote attack the virus and for another few months, and then by that time, and I'm hoping and praying there won't be another strain because we're dealing
Mhm.
with COVID-19. Whether there's a COVID-25 or COVID
Yes.
or COVID-30, so you make a very strong point that even with the here in the United States with the fall months coming in, the
Mhm.
Septembers, Octobers, Novembers, and Decembers, there's a fear that COVID-19 is going to rear its ugly head again. So we're going to open up the cities and then maybe get right back to where we started in the fall because this virus may come back. Well, you know what? Right now, we need to kind of set up plans and contingency plans that I talked about earlier to kind of safeguard against that. And, the long short of it is, and everyone agrees, we've got to have some solidified, consistent testing in place. And thereby goes back that same thought process as I mentioned earlier. That's where the financial markets are now colliding with the healthcare markets because financial markets are waiting on testing.
Yes. Correct. That's true.
It's not crazy, but it's where we're at right now. So you could talk about the Dow and you could talk about all the financial constraints and issues that are faced here in the United States and I'm sure globally, but everyone's saying the same thing. We need adequate testing so that the market feels comfortable and confident enough to keep trying to get this thing moving forward. And so without that adequate testing, ensuring that people are properly tested and even those who are asymptomatic are in place, we're all still at a stalemate. And I think that's what's making everyone kind of uneasy right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, if you look back to the flu epidemic all those years ago,
Yes.
it was the secondary outbreak was the one
Yes.
that did the most damage. So that's something that we have to be mindful, and business owners have to be mindful of as well,
Yes.
moving forward. But as I said earlier, not all businesses are actually doing badly
Mm-hmm.
at the moment. I mean, I was reading over the weekend in the FT that Marathon Asset Management, Vardy, and Angelo Gordon have been raising funds. Marathon raised 500 million, Vardy a billion, um, Angelo Gordon 750 million, looking to
Yeah.
go to the market and um, taking advantage of those unmissable opportunities. I think a lot of firms historically, well, when you look back at the financial crisis of '09, I think a lot of organizations have learned from that, and the market has learned from that. We missed opportunities back then. Now is the opportunity to maybe take advantage. So we're seeing a lot of movement. Um, well, granted, it's early days yet, but we're beginning to see companies come out and start, raising funds and looking for opportunities. But what should they be mindful of? Coming to market and getting back to trying to do business and re-enter the market.
We there's an old saying that is wonderful, and people have kind of looked at this saying as either positive or negative, and I guess I look at it as the glass half empty, or I'm sure the glass half full versus half empty, and it's that never let a crisis go to waste.
Hmm. True, true.
Because I think this is where people look at this with as the glass is half empty. There's opportunities. While no one wants this crisis, no one wants to be at home, no one wants to be out of work, obviously, and no one wants our economy, the global economy, even in this case, to go through the floor. There are those that will look at this and say, "Hey, look, there's some opportunities. This is a bad situation, but we have to make." Lemons out of lemonade, or we have to make lemonade out of lemons, I guess,
Hmm.
at this point, and never and finding opportunities. So that's the other side of this. You will find some companies that will succeed through this, and that's where I give the fourth point of my quote unquote commandments when you talk about assessment, recovery, and aspiration. The last point is elasticity. Companies who are able to be flexible, who are able to be very innovative, who find different types of opportunities. I saw some the other day where there's a company, and this may seem silly, but hey, there could be a market for it. There's a company that's coming out with designer masks. I
Yes.
mean, now you laugh at that, you giggle, and you chuckle at that, and you smile at that, but that's just an example of there will be companies that will come out with innovations where investment houses will look at that and go, that's innovative, and we are going into a new world where I want to participate with that because here's a company that's resilient. Here's a
Mhm.
company that didn't say, hey, look, our current business right now is failing and we're not going to come out of this, so I don't know what we're going to do. Ken, versus a company says, you know what, our company's in a bad way, we've got to pivot.
Mhm.
We've got to look at our business and maybe pivot in another direction to kind of get through this. And I think you're going to see investors, and even investors right now that are continuing, their capital giving. They're looking at companies that have such great leadership that the leadership is able to pivot and come up with new innovative ways to be able to kind of get through this crisis, and not only get through it, but succeed after this crisis kind of
Yes,
subsides.
of course,
That's
of
the
course.
key. That's the key. And so you're going to see a lot of companies right now become very innovative where investors are just sitting back saying, hey, look, now is the time to strike. Because now, I can leverage, I can get some very good assets on some very good pricing deals
Mhm.
because of the occurrences that we're going through and the issues that we're going through right now. I can get some good deals, but also I can also kind of shop for some very good innovative deals that'll not only get us through this, but help us succeed on the back end of this. So yeah, I'm not surprised that there are some investment houses that are bullish right now in terms of looking for those companies and providing capital for those companies because they're looking at it as what, never let a crisis go to waste, and this is a perfect time to look for some very good opportunities based on innovation and of course most importantly based on leadership.
Exactly, absolutely. And we said it at the top of the call as well. There's those organizations that are looking at the market as a positive, and those who, due to the market that they're in, it's they're in a negative
Mm-hmm.
position at the moment. But I mean, within every crisis market, there's always opportunity. I mean, as I said, from the recruitment industry point of view, I mean, firms are still pushing ahead. We've had in all parts of the world, may it be Europe, the Middle East, and North America, we've had senior opportunities go all the way through to offer stage. So there will always be an opportunity in the market, regardless. Now, granted, they won't be as plentiful, but there's still opportunities out there. Now, in terms of those markets that are, I suppose, coming up with your investments, your all of your experience on the investment side of things, Andre. I mean, what do you think are the markets to focus on, really?
I mean, I think most people would say, and it's some agreement. Most people would say, obviously, the IT markets are always good, especially everyone is jumping on, and it's a reactive. Everyone's jumping on, the virtual space, the technology space, the different platforms such as Zoom, and everybody's seeing that. Well, geez, there's never going to be any face to face or any close proximity interactions anymore, and that's not true. That's
Mhm.
not
Of
true.
course,
You
yeah.
know, we're all interactive, close by side human beings. We enjoy. You read every day how people feel a sense of loneliness when they're at home, if they're not married, and they're single or they're by themselves. So we all thrive to be close to one another, and we all thrive for that interaction. So to say that the industries of tomorrow and the new normal, I guess, is going to be the technology and the virtual and this kind of thing, to say that's going to be the be all, the end all. I'm not sure I totally agree with that. I think obviously if you want to invest your money in those markets, that's probably not a big risk. But I would venture to say, and again, I'm being a little bit biased, but I'm trying not to be. But I still think I still think healthcare
Mhm.
is going to be the industry that has the most opportunities because I think moving forward, and you hear this a lot with respects to what we're going through with the virus and that, a lot of people that are having a tough go of this virus are those that already have compromised immunities, whether they have comorbidities, they have issues within like diabetes, other type of immune system issues are having a tough time with COVID, you're going to start seeing, Ken, this whole aspect of lifestyle management.
Mhm.
People being able to have access to better food, people having better access to exercise, people having better access to healthcare. Healthcare itself is going to start to be a little bit more innovative in terms of its growth. One of the things that we're seeing with this whole COVID thing is, and this is global, this is just not the United States, is that our healthcare systems across the planet have much to be improved upon. We're seeing capacities being stretched with a lot of these hospitals and a lot of these, healthcare agencies. Things such as just swabs and alcohol cures and face masks. Things that we just used to just throw in the garbage and not even think of, prior to this
Mhm.
epidemic, now becoming like gold.
Yes.
So what does that tell you? That tells you that there's still a lot of room for opportunities within the healthcare space. So again, while all of my career since college and B school has been from the healthcare space, and I'm a little, like I said, I'm a little biased. I still think that the healthcare industry and healthcare space are, and those companies that have innovations within that space are going to be areas to really look at from an investment standpoint. And then I would venture to say, and this may be a little bit controversial, but I'm still going to say this. I'm going to say,
Mhm.
the restaurant business. People are saying, hey, the restaurant business is going to go away. I'm not sure. I think you're going to see some innovations with regards to restaurants. This whole idea of, well, a lot of restaurants are going to have to pull seats out because, we're going to have social distancing. Yeah, I think that's going to be the case in the short run, but I think 2 to 3 years from now, as vaccines start to come out and as we start to become, and when I say we, I'm talking not only of the United States, but I'm
Mhm.
talking globally,
Yes.
how we're going to be able to have resources that are going to be able to attack, some of these viruses and different strains. I
Mhm.
think you'll start to see that, the food business and the food industry business start to come back with bringing more innovation to it, where we'll be able to protect each of us if we want to go out to dinner. Because again, going out to eat and going out to really nice dining is still an entertainment option for all of
Mhm.
us as human beings. So this whole idea that the restaurant business is going to go away, and not necessarily go away, but it's going to suffer from years from now, I don't agree with that. So
Mhm.
I'm one of these people that think the industries that are hit the most right now are the industries probably that are going to come back, because they're the industries that are going to have to be very innovative.
Mhm.
So if I'm investing and if I'm talking to investors or if I'm working with an investment house, I'm saying, hey, look, don't shy away from those industries that are suffering right now. No, they're going to
Yes.
come back, and guess what? They're going to be more innovative because they're going to have to be more
Mhm.
innovative to come back. And so those will be my picks. Yeah.
Mhm. Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, it's all well and good talking about, when, the bans lift and we all get back to the office, and we've spoken about that. But there is the risk of a prolonged virus outbreak. I mean, we don't know
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen. I mean, what plans should, organizations be putting in place for a prolonged, longer term outbreak and more social distancing, if you like? Anything that firms can be doing?
Yeah, if I knew the answer to that and I said, hey, look, this is what everyone should do, I would probably be on every news. They would say, who is this guy and how does he know all this? Who is he? Not Nostradamus? I don't think anyone, even from the most intelligent of us, really know point B to tell somebody, yeah, you should do this, because no one knows what this is. That's the issue. But one of the things I can say is this whole idea of preparing for the unexpected. And when I say preparing for the unexpected, I think each company and each investor should have a plan A, should have a plan B, should
Hmm.
have a plan C, and should have a plan D. And so that seems kind of crazy, because we as a business society, and we as even a human society, always comes out. Every company has its beginning of the year aspiration, which is their business plan, and they stick, and then you try to stick to that business plan throughout the whole year. Or who's put a business plan together that is, filled with ambiguities. Well, that's the world we're walking into right now.
Hmm.
So
True.
the thing I would say is, hey, if you're in a business of, if you, for example, if you're in the customer service business, that customers are going to lack confidence coming in back into the market. For example, we just talked about the restaurant business. Or if and I'm speaking, I guess, more specifically the United States. If every state in the United States opens up, that means that the restaurant business and those that had, like as I mentioned, strong balance sheets, and they're able to weather the storm, and they can come back. And even your mom and pa's who decide, hey, look, we're going to pivot to another area of our business, we can come back and maybe we can hire half of our workforce coming back. What is that going to look like? How are we going to be, and what I'm saying is, from a customer standpoint, how can we ensure the customer that they can feel confident coming into our establishment? So
Hmm.
from a customer service standpoint, how can we help our customers feel comfortable that they can come back into a safe environment? So that could be a direction. So what
Yeah.
is that experience and environment going to look like? So
Hmm.
that's speaking from a restaurant or a food business.
Hmm.
Customer confidence, that should be our mantra. So that could be an overall arching kind of theme. How can we ensure that the customers, when they walk into our establishment, they're going to enjoy the experience, they're going to enjoy our food, but most importantly, they're going to feel what? Safe in our
Correct.
establishment. So
Hmm.
that could be a direction. From a healthcare, if I'm investing in a company, that sells, medical devices, how are these medical devices not only going to be efficacious, they're going to be cost benefit. How can I ensure that our medical devices, whether they're a raw material, raw good, or even a medical device, going to be safe from a infection rate? For example, I was talking with a company that's looking for capital, that's going through their capital raise. They're coming out with this machine that's going to go into each of the hospitals, and it's going to be able to tell the hospital what types of nosocomial, what type of hospital infections are maybe somewhat prevalent in that hospital, how they're going to be
Right.
able to test that. It's a brilliant product. So
Hmm.
something like that, you're going to help the hospital save money, but you're going to also help people coming into that hospital feel confident that the hospital is safe and sterilized, and they shouldn't worry about catching nosocomial infections. So things like that and it goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about innovation.
Hmm.
How can the restaurant business become more innovative in terms of their customer service and making customers feel comfortable and making customers feel safe? How can the healthcare industry provide goods and services to ensure that whoever their customers are feel as though their products are going to be not only effective but also safe? So this whole safety, thought process moving forward should be one of the major pendulums in a strategy. Safety and comfortability and confidence around safety has to be there with any industry that you uncover. And I guess I'm speaking from an investment standpoint, moving forward on the back end. So again, there's no specific plan that I can provide from a recommendation, because again, no one knows. But the one thing you can be sure is you got to get everyone comfortable to be able to go back into the office, to be able to
Hmm.
go back into a restaurant. And
Hmm.
so, is the safety going to be there? That's the recommendation, and that's the one thing that I think should be in everyone's plan
Hmm.
moving forward. Yeah.
I think you mentioned it there, and the one point that I'm taking away from what you were saying there was elasticity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's having, the flexibility, and we've spoken a number of times about this, but it's the ability to, I suppose, pivot and adapt to changes quickly. That's elasticity.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a great point, and and that's not rocket science. I think everyone would say elasticity is something that is going to be needed coming out the end of this. And whether you say elasticity or malleable or flexible, we're seeing it happen right now.
Mhm.
Your restaurants again are going to pick up, even though that's probably 50% of their overall profits. That's not 100%. That's the only way they can maintain being open and only maintain maybe keeping maybe half of their employees is to have pick up at the door as opposed to coming in and sitting down at the table. Healthcare companies that have been maybe specializing in, let's say, I don't know, cancer. Well, that still may be the case, but now they're making a pivot on, no, let's talk about comorbidities that may relate to cancer, lifestyle modifications. Let's talk about diabetes. Let's talk about hypertension. Let's talk about all these other things that may be a cause of these virulent strains that are coming about cancer. So now, and then also patient empowerment. How can we pivot and provide more tools and resources towards the patient so that they are able to take care of themselves at home?
Hmm.
If again,
Yes.
if we go to that situation where people are not going to the office every day, but they're staying at home, how can we provide maybe home remedies or home resources or home products so that patients can monitor themselves? That's a pivot
Hmm.
where they don't have to always come into the doctor's office every day, or once in a blue moon, and that kind of thing. So those are things um, that companies, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in the restaurant business, whether you're even in IT, kind of have to think about from an innovation standpoint. How can we pivot to something else that's going to help us to grow profits and to become prosperous out the back end of all this? So that whole pivot thing basically is just another way of saying how can we be a little bit more innovative, Keith, or Ken,
Yep,
coming out of
yep,
this. Yeah,
absolutely.
sorry.
Yeah, very,
Mm-hmm.
very true. Now, I'm mindful of your time, Andre, as well, and you've made
Mm-hmm.
some really, really valuable points so far. But finally, I mean, is there any final advice that you could, offer some of our listeners out there, given your vast experience?
Yeah, yeah. The one thing I would say is, I've had this conversation with everyone that I've spoken with, and it's a word that will stick with me until until I've left this earth, and this is the whole idea of leadership vision. Um, if you're an investor and you're investing in a startup, a mid cap company, or even a company that's needing more capital coming out of this, is you really want to look at the leadership and the vision. And even though the vision is going to, possibly change through this, you should be confident and comfortable to know that whoever you're investing in, or even if I take on the side of the CEO who's running a startup or who's running a mid-sized company or who's running a business trying to come out of this, you should still have a vision. And while that vision, is possibly going to change or should be malleable, it shouldn't be one of these situations where, and I'm seeing this a little bit, Ken, where I'm seeing companies just kind of waiting
Mhm.
and reacting to what happens versus being proactive.
Yes.
And the companies that are proactive, they've got a vision in place and they've got an elasticity plan in place. Those are the ones that are going to be the most successful coming out of this. So the whole vision standpoint should still be in play. My vision is we're going to pivot this way. My vision is coming out of this, we're going to go this way. There should still be a vision in place because that vision should be about being proactive, not being reactive. If you're a company, uh, if you're like I mentioned, if you're a startup, you're a mid-size, or you're a company, or even I'll throw the investments, the investor space in this. If you are in the aspect of reacting to whatever's going to happen, you're going to lose.
Hmm.
I'll repeat, if you react, you're going to lose. This is the time to be proactive. Proactive now has risks, obviously, because you've got to make some calls.
Hmm.
But those are going to be the companies that are going to come out on the other side of this. And those are the companies that are going to be proactive based on their vision, not being reactive and waiting for things to happen to them. So that's the advice I would give. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great advice and very pertinent as well. Andre, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. It's been a pleasure.
This has been a lot of fun, Ken, and we've got to do many more of these.
We do indeed. We do indeed. And we've got plenty to speak about because the market is changing so quickly. It's changing week on week.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's definitely plenty of scope and plenty of
Yeah.
material to speak about over the coming weeks for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so
Excellent.
much.
Thanks, Andre. Speak to you soon.
Yep. Okay. Bye bye.